Hello, I'm Sarah Barrett-Neal, Gallery Manager with the Glen Arbor Arts Center. Today, as part of the Arts Center's current exhibit, Swimming, I'm in conversation with John Hartig about his new book, Great Lakes Champions. Great Lakes Champions is a detailed work focused on the stories of 14 grassroots champions who fought to restore the Great Lakes. And John has worn many hats. He's a scientist, the author of 8 books about bodies of water and conservation ethics, a visiting scholar at the Great Lakes Institute for Environmental Research at the University of Windsor, a resident of Metro Detroit, and a 2018 artist in residence with the Glen Arbor Arts Center. Welcome, John.
So nice to be with you today, Sarah.
Thank you. We are, to spread the metaphor a little further, going to dive in. And I'd like you to begin by talking about what makes a champion in your book a champion.
Well, wonderful. I've had the privilege and I'm so fortunate to have worked on the cleanup of all these most polluted areas of the Great Lakes called areas of concern. And in 35 years, I've come across people who have this incredible passion for the Great Lakes, Sarah. They are good collaborators. They know how to collaborate, and they're well respected and trusted in their community. They don't give up in the face of adversity, and they work tirelessly to pass on the Great Lakes as a gift to future generations. They're always thinking about what can we do to pass this on to the next generation.
You have a nice list at the end of your book that goes into those characteristics a little bit further. And that's a good place for people to go to get a more nuanced view of what makes a champion a champion. So this is a book about Great Lakes restoration. Talk about how you try to balance the science that's part of your story with the stories of heartfelt work.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I am a scientist by training, and I clearly wanted to make this book, at least in part, a story of how science can help solve these ecosystem problems throughout the Great Lakes. That's the first thing. But secondly, and equally as important, I want to make sure that I wanted people to know that ecological restoration is about solving ecosystem problems through people management. These problems were created by people, so we have to learn to work together. So the Great Lakes champions were like conductors of choirs. They had to bring everyone together to work together. They had to form partnerships. And what I talk about is they had to co-produce knowledge. So we don't know everything, right, Sarah? And we have to fill some knowledge gaps. So how do we do that together and bring everyone up to a common level of understanding to take the next step? So we want to co-produce knowledge and then co-innovate solutions to clean this up, this mess up that has been created over many, many decades. So it's a great example of that, and that's my hope.
A little bit about grassroots activism as you encountered it. Specifically, why can't governmental agencies do all the work you describe? Why is grassroots activism important?
It is absolutely essential because governments can only do so much, whether it's federal government or state government or county. But some of the problems, like land use problems and the runoff off our lands, whether it's agricultural land or urban areas, cannot be easily solved by a permit. You know what I mean? And then there's other areas like habitat. Who's in charge of habitat? Everyone's in charge of habitat, right? And contaminated sediments. So we need grassroots activism to help raise the profile of local issues and get people to come together to solve them. I like to think the importance of activists, grassroots activists, as continuous and vigorous oversight of governmental programs. You know, we need that honest broker. We need that honest voice for all people, for future generations as well.
Well, the activists you profile live in the places where the Great Lakes restoration needs to take place. I was thinking as you were talking about the phrase hearts and minds. And activism often is about winning over hearts and minds. Your example about who owns the habitat hits the nail on the head right there.
Right, yeah. Who best to come up with a vision for a watershed than people who live in the watershed? Who needs to pull these people together but grassroots activists from that watershed, and hopefully develop a vision for their watershed that can be carried in the hearts and minds of all people, you know?
I'm going to put your book on the screen here. This is the book, Great Lakes Champions. And I want to get into a little bit about your 2018 residency with the Glen Arbor Arts Center. You came here intending to really burrow in on aspects of this book. So talk a little bit from the point of view as an author, what those 2 weeks of that artist residency allowed you to do.
Yes. First of all, you know, thank you for that opportunity. What a gift that was to me, because everyone's busy. You know, I have a full-time job. My passion is to try to write and inspire people about this, but I don't have always the time to do that. To go away and get uninterrupted time for 2 weeks and write is amazing, you know. And while I was there, I wrote the prologue and 3 chapters of the book. You know, it was amazing. And then to do it in this incredibly inspirational place, Glen Arbor, you know, where you can literally walk down the street and see the sunset every day. It's pretty special.
Yeah, the Glen Arbor Arts Center is about 4 city blocks from Lake Michigan. And I thought that was an interesting backdrop for your project, writing about Great Lakes restoration. Talk about when you were here, what and how Lake Michigan insinuated itself into your residency.
Yeah, because it was very significant. Obviously, not only did I walk down the road to the lake right there, but then in going to the farmhouse, I would go, you know, almost every day for either a morning or an afternoon to the farmhouse, and I would write in there and stuff. But then, as you know, you can go down to that little beach. Like literally, you can walk from the farmhouse down that gravel road and go to this amazing, pristine beach that likely you'll see no one else there. Once in a while, you'll somebody walking with a dog. But what a great place to be inspired by, you know, 20% of the fresh water on the surface of the earth. You know, this amazing, continentally significant natural resource, but globally significant natural resource that we have a responsibility to take care of.
That farmhouse you're talking about is part of the national lakeshore, the Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore. And that beach you refer to, the local people like to think of it as the last secret beach on the face of the earth.
Oh my gosh. That was my my first day, somebody told me, do you know about this beach? And I said, I don't. And they said, would you like to know about it? And I said, absolutely. It's great. It was wonderful. Yes, it was just such a wonderful experience. And all the people up there were so wonderful to interact with. And yeah, just so honored and privileged to have had that residency.
I hope this book will be read and used. And from the perspective of a writer, is the subject you've chosen for this book a niche subject with a distinct audience or something other?
Yeah, I think it is kind of a niche subject, but I hope that, these people that come up to Glen Arbor or go to the UP or go to an inland lake and they vacation for a week or two in the summer, and that's the extent of their connection to the Great Lakes, and I'm hoping that some of those people will read this book and get inspired and understand that you and I are not separate from our ecosystem. We're part of it. We like to talk about, as scientists, the difference between environment and ecosystem is like the difference between house and home. House is across the street over there. It's external and detached from you and I. But when we talk about our home, we talk about it as if we were in it. So we are part of the ecosystem, and what we do to it, the ecosystem, we do to ourselves. So I'm hoping that, we sometimes we talk about stepping stones of engagement, of engaging the public. You get that vacation experience up in Glen Arbor or Sleeping Bear or some place. You come back and you question, I wonder what's in my backyard, and go look at some of the places in your backyard, whether it's a stream, whether it's a pond, whether it's a lake or another portion of the Great Lakes. And then slowly you learn more about it, and you gain this sense of wonder that is so important, this sense of wonder about it. And that can lead to, well, who's going to take care of it? It's going to have to be us. And how do we do that? So developing this stewardship conservation ethic is one of the goals of what I do.
You, in line with what you're saying, you have an interesting story in the book about your experience as a child on the Great Lakes, some day trips to Lake Erie, where your parents told you don't go into the water. You write that your response to that directive was, how can this be?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about how those experiences and memories incubated over the years and how they influenced the direction of your life and your writing.
Yes. I grew up in metropolitan Detroit. My formative years were in Allen Park, a suburb just really near Detroit, there on the banks of the Rouge. And when I was very young, my dad used to like to take me down to the end of Southfield Boulevard there that ends up at the Detroit River, and we would fish, and there would be oil all over the river and oil on the rocks. And he loved the fish. He says, well, we catch the fish and we'll throw them back in. We're not going to eat them. And I said, how can that be? And then we would go down to the nearest state park to us was Sterling State Park, just off the mouth of the Detroit River in Monroe. And we'd go down there, and big signs saying, do not swim. And my parents, here you go to a beach, there's some expectation as a kid that you're going to go swimming, and you can't go in the water because it's contaminated with raw sewage, And so how can that be? And then when I was a junior in high school, we came out of school one day and there was a whole bunch of smoke on the horizon. And we said, oh my goodness, that must be either the Ford Rouge plant, or it must be a steel company, or something has caught on fire. And by the time we got home, we had learned that the river caught on fire, in 1969. And amazing. How can a river catch on fire? Well, water can't burn, but it's the oil and petroleum products that were just being dumped in the river that was on top, and a worker dropped an acetylene torch, caught the river on fire, and you can't put it out. The only thing they could do is take the fireboat called John Kendall and 10 pieces of fire department equipment to contain it and let it to burn out. Those were formative experiences, like singed into my consciousness, and then I'd go up and come up to Sleeping Bear. I would go to these inland lakes, and it would be polar opposite experiences, to that. And how can that be? And so I got interested in water and went away and got my undergraduate degree and went on to my master's, and then went on, got a Ph.D. and wanted to make a difference in caring for these waters.
That interesting question, how can that be, seems to have hailed you throughout your life. And it sounds like it was a great springboard for directing some of the activities of your life, trying to answer, how can that be?
How can that be? And how can we let that happen? So why, if we have pollution control programs for industries, municipalities, yet this was still happening. How can we let that happen? Aren't we smarter than that? Can't we do better than that? And so always questioning that. And then, of course, the rest got interested in not only studying the lakes, but then trying to solve problems and impact policy development and impact management as well.
John, when I read your book, and I've had this response when I've read other books like it, I always wonder, when people take on a very difficult, in your case, this is kind of a monumental subject, how do you keep despair off to the side, or at very least not let it derail your writing and your process?
Yeah, it's easy to, see a lot of despair. There are so many problems, and sometimes, I'm a glass half full person, obviously, and I want to be that person, and I want to be the person who says we can do something. I think if you look at the places like, let's just take one, and Fox River in Wisconsin and Green Bay, right across from where you are, Sarah, on the other side of Lake Michigan, and it had the largest concentration of pulp and paper mills in the world at one time. And they were not only making paper, but recycling some of the product. And what happened is PCBs in the inks got into the Fox River and contaminated the sediments. So it was one of the worst contaminated sediment problems in the Great Lakes. And everyone said, oh, there's no way we can do something about this. There's no way we could do it. And now here, 3 decades later, we're standing, and they've spent $1.1 billion on the cleanup of that, and seeing measurable progress in the ecosystem. And it is definitely possible.
So that sense that things are possible versus impossible is kind of like the life raft in your brain as you're working on this project.
Yeah, so things are possible, restoration is possible, revival is possible. But then we also have to be thinking about what are the benefits to the community, and how do the community, okay, certainly they benefit by cleaner water and fewer contaminants in fish and more wonderful outdoor recreational opportunities. But what we've learned is the cleanup of these pollution hotspots leads to reconnecting people to these waterways. So think of greenway trails and think of water trails. And then that leads to community and economic revitalization. And one of the most dramatic stories of that is right on the Detroit River. And in downtown Detroit, you have the Detroit Riverwalk, and it was for decades, it was abandoned buildings, dilapidated buildings, material storage piles, 3 sets of cement silos, and surface parking lots. Well, today we have to reconnect people to these waters, improve public access. We now have a nearly 6-mile Detroit Riverwalk, the #1 Riverwalk in the United States 3 years running. Amazing. In the first 10 years, they spent $140 million on building the Detroit Riverwalk. They did an economic benefits study. The return on that investment was $1 billion of additional benefits to the community, other developments and everything else. So what a story of community benefits as well. And that's one of the lessons, is we need to be telling the community benefits as well.
John, thank you for this conversation, and also thank you for your advocacy. Tell us how to find the book.
Tell us about, what was that question?
Tell us where one can find
Absolutely. You can get it at, just go to Michigan State University Press, and you can get it there, and you can get it on Amazon. There's a number of Barnes and Noble. It's pretty easy out there to get the book.
Swimming, the exhibit, continues through June 1. You can read about it and look at it online by going to glenarborart.org/exhibits. I want to thank everyone for watching. I hope that this conversation inspires all of us to be a champion of some sort, and see you next time.